مساء أكل انت نري ورهي جرود تكو انت شمر يا دو تند نشمر بعد التفوق يا دو تند نشمر بعد التفوق
مساء أكل انت نري ورهي جرود تكو انت شمر يا دو تند نشمر بعد التفوق شمر يا دو تند نشمر بعد التفوق.
Hi folks, this is Ken Behrens with Tropical Birding, and today I'll take you on a virtual birding tour of Morocco in northwestern Africa. So here's a really broad-scale geographical context for Morocco. It's in northwestern Africa. Here's the massive Sahara Desert. And then up here along the Mediterranean coast, there's a different sort of habitat, a moister heath sort of habitat, which is kind of habitat that's found all the way around the Mediterranean. Obviously, immediately to the north of Morocco is Spain. To the south, you've got massive Algeria. And if you zoom in a bit, you'll see that through the middle of Morocco are the Atlas Mountains. So you have quite a diverse set of birds here. You've got these Mediterranean birds, you have a lot of wetland birds there. You have Atlas mountain birds. Some are endemic to North Africa and some are shared with Europe. And then you have these Saharan birds. You're getting these just at the northern edge of their range. So there's not a ton of endemics on this tour, but this is a great tour as an introduction to Northern Africa. And if you haven't been to Europe, there'll be a lot of new birds for you as well that are shared with Europe. This shows the tropical birding tour route. We fly into Marrakech. It's a famous city near the middle of Morocco. We go up into the Atlas Mountains, then we cross the Atlas Mountains. We spend a couple days birding at the edge of the Sahara. Then we shoot out to the coast at Agadir for Mediterranean and wetland birds. And then we circle back to Marrakech. This is a short and sweet 9-day tour. Here's the topographic map. Again, you see the Atlas Mountains are very striking. This is the High Atlas Mountains that we cross. So Marrakech is here, we cross the High Atlas. We bird the edge of the Sahara here, and then we come out here to the mouth of the Massa River and do some birding. So zooming in, when we fly in, there's a big international airport in Marrakech. So we fly into Marrakech, and of course this is a birding tour, so we start birding immediately. Very common bird in Morocco is the house bunting. It's so common that you can actually see it inside of the airport terminal, a bit like a house sparrow in some parts of the world. There's a male. Another pretty common bird around Marrakech is the spotless starling. It's a little bit different than the European starling. And another common bird is the Maghreb magpie. It's been split from the common or Eurasian magpie. It's only in North Africa. So after arriving in Marrakech, we head straight up into the High Atlas Mountains to a ski resort called Oases, which is a great place to start birding. This is some of the scenery along the way up. Very rugged and spectacular. You've got these evergreen forests. This is on a busy day at the ski resort. At the time of year when we do our tour, there's sometimes been fresh snow and it can look like this. Pretty amazing. Not exactly what people think of when they think of Africa. And up at the top you have sweeping, spectacular views way down to the plains of Marrakech and all the surrounding Atlas Mountains. It's quite a stunning place. There's some ancient stone dwellings up there, most of which aren't occupied anymore, but they were occupied just up into the recent past. One of our big targets at Oases is the crimson-winged finch, which is sort of the North African equivalent of a rosy finch. It's a very high elevation bird often found on snowbanks. Great looking finch. We often see two species of choughs up there, the alpine chough, as well as the red-billed chough. The unusual slender-billed crows. Another common bird, common European bird, is the rock bunting. And a localized subspecies is the Atlas Mountain subspecies of horned lark. From this angle you can really appreciate those horns. This is a North African endemic bird called Mousier's redstart. It's quite fun to say. Moussier. Very sharp little bird. This bird is actually common all the way from the high Atlas Mountains down to the coast. Here's some scenery on the way down from the high part of Oukaimeden. You can see it's pretty heavily populated, and there's these intricate terraces up the sides of the mountain. It's one thing about Morocco, it's one of these parts of the world where people have been living for a very long time, even in very rugged and wild places. So we head down to a fertile nearby valley, and we stay in this beautiful kasbah. It's sort of like a fairyland castle. It's this big, tall, multi-story structure. It has this courtyard inside. It really is a magical place. It's one of my favorite hotels in the world. Wonderful rooms and wonderful views from the top of this fertile valley. It can be quite a good place for birding as well. And of course, we tuck into our first of many wonderful meals of Moroccan food. Moroccan food is justly famous. You get wonderful olives just about everywhere. You get these kebabs, different kinds of barbecue. This is a tagine, that's the famous Moroccan dish. This is French fries. This is some Fanta. Wonderful fresh vegetables, some olives. This is a sort of stuffed Moroccan pizza called medfouna. It's fantastic. And here's the classic tagine. This looks like a lamb tagine with some prunes and some sesame. Absolutely wonderful. Slow cooked in a clay pot. Here's a vegetarian tagine. It's a good trip for vegetarians. And here's a typical little sort of restaurant where we might have lunch. A lot of the restaurants have these sort of couches with pillows. I quite enjoy this kind of oriental dining. It's quite relaxed. So after a night in our fairyland kasbah, we cross the Atlas Mountains to go out to the edge of the Sahara. So here's Marrakech, and we shoot out to Oukaimeden here, and then we sleep here, and then the next morning we cross to this major road, and we cross the high Atlas Mountains over the Tizinticha Pass. And along the way, you can see on the northern slopes, there's a lot of forest. So this is a great place for some birding. This is what it looks like. Wonderful scenery continues. And we'll be birding for some very special birds. This is a North African endemic, the Valence woodpecker. Quite striking in flight. And this is another North African specialty, the Tristram's warbler. This is a widespread European bird, the firecrest. Very good looking bunting, also a common European bird, the Cyril bunting. This is a female type and that's a male. Another common bird is the common chaffinch, but there's a endemic subspecies in North Africa. You can see it, just a hint of this green back. Quite different from the European birds. Possible that'll be split at some point. So carrying on from this lush area, you cross the Atlas Mountains and you wind down, and things just get drier and drier. And we drive down, and then we end up here, and Bourmont-Dates, and this is the nearest town to a famous birding site called the Tagdilt Track. This here is the Tagdilt Track. It's basically a pretty unassuming road through some nice desert habitat. And it's sort of the closest place to Europe where you can see a bunch of true Saharan birds. So here's the scenery at the Tagdilt Track. You've got this low shrub desert, and then you've got the Atlas foothills in the background. Quite a sweeping, beautiful place. The Tagdilt Track is a very famous place to see larks. Lots of different larks. This is a crested lark, but there's a special subspecies called the long-billed crested lark in this area. This is the widespread greater short-toed lark. and the lesser short-toed lark, also pretty widespread European bird. This is more of a specialty that people are looking for. This is the Temminck's lark. It's a lot like a horned lark, but it has no yellow on the throat. It's like a very pale horned lark. It's a real desert bird. And this is an even rarer and more specialized bird. It's the thick-billed lark. The Tagdilt Track is one of the best places in the world to see this bird. Tagdilt's also excellent for wheat ears. Morocco has to be one of the best trips on earth for wheat ears. This is a common migratory desert wheat ear. This is another fairly common one, the red-rumped wheat ear. That's a male, and that's a plain female. Another common wheat ear is the white-crowned wheat ear. Just to throw you off, this one doesn't actually have a white crown. It's probably an immature. So after sleeping in Bourmandades, we head east to get into even truer desert habitat. Head east. Drive through the town of Erfoud, and then we end up here on the edge of this big dune field. It's starting to feel like real proper Saharan desert now. And we sleep at this kasbah right at the edge of this dune field. It's a wonderful place. Here's what the scenery looks like when we arrive after a long day's drive. Sun's starting to set. Installed in a nice kasbah. This place is like a fort, like a desert fort. And the night skies can be spectacular. This is a cool photo by Lyle Gwynn, another tropical birding guide. Well, the next morning we wake up bright and early and we head out to bird in the desert. This is definitely the most exciting day of the tour for most people. There's a whole bunch of fantastic birds that we're looking for, and we're just able to drive through the open desert in 4x4s. So it's a very exciting kind of birding. So we start the morning usually looking for sand grouse. There's a couple species in the area. This is the most regularly seen one, the spotted sand grouse. You might see them flying around, like in this first picture. And then, if you've staked out a water hole, you'll see them coming closer, and then eventually landing. It's the female on the left and the male on the right. Beautiful birds. Sand grouse are some of my favorite birds in the world. I eventually want to see all the world's sand grouse. Got a few left to see. Another open desert bird is the cream-colored courser. Doing some cream-colored coursing. In this sort of habitat, in an area where you have sand but in some little bushes, you can get the greater hoopoe lark. It looks pretty cool on the ground. It's a little bit drab. Nice long bill. Long legs. But when it takes to the wing, that's when you see what a spectacular bird it really is. It has this hoopoe-like pattern in the wings. Really unusual, unique lark. And if we're lucky, we might find some displaying greater hoopoe larks. They basically fly up into the air, stall out, and then shoot straight to the ground and make this whistling call. It's quite a thing to see. Another bird that's in similar habitat is the African desert warbler. Bleached out little warbler. Looks like it's been sitting in the desert sun for far too long. This is another one of the major targets on this exciting day. Can you actually see where the bird is? This is an Egyptian nightjar. And the way that we see this bird is that the local guide that we work with here has some friends who live at the edge of the desert, and they go out pre-dawn and they listen for these birds calling, and they see them flying around, and they watch for them to go to the ground and roost for the day, and then they sit there and then they watch the birds and they call us, and then we arrive and we're able to see them. It's a wonderful system for birders. Here you can see the bird a little bit better. really pale, gorgeous nightjar. This is some sand and the footprints of another of our major targets, the desert sparrow. This is a bird that I was obsessed with as a kid. It was in my European guide, and I just thought it was so cool that there was this virtually white house sparrow living in the Sahara Desert. So the first time I saw this bird was really fulfilling an almost lifelong dream. It's a beautiful little bird and a real desert specialist. It's being pushed deeper and deeper into the desert by competition from house sparrows. It's getting harder and harder to see. So we go visit a different kind of habitat to search for a couple other birds. This is a date palm oasis, and this is where you find fulvous babbler. Babblers are always good. Lots of character, noisy, pugnacious birds. And towards the end of the day, we go to some cliffs that are known roosting sites for pharaoh eagle owls. And with a little bit of luck and a lot of scanning, we might see something like this, or even better, like this. It's a huge eagle owl, sort of the size of a great horned owl. Sometimes the same cliffs also have nesting lanner falcons. Well, after a long day's birding, we might walk out onto the sand dunes to enjoy a spectacular desert sunset. So the next day is more of a travel day. We're heading west. We have a stop overnight here in Oases, and then we're headed for Agadir. Along the way, we might see an incredibly overloaded vehicle like this. We'll do some opportunistic birding. Might pick up another uncommon bird or two, like the trumpeter finch. If we're really lucky, we might get the morning wheat here. Actually, I have to confess, it kind of hurts me to show you this photo because I still have not seen this bird. My friend Lyle Gwynn has been very lucky with this bird on Morocco tours. And I still haven't seen this bird, but I'm going the extra mile to really show you what's in Morocco. We'll make a stop at a place called the Todra Gorge. You can see this strip of green is a date palm oasis, and then you've got this very rugged scenery of the gorge. Almost vertical rock walls. This is the oasis in the town. And this is the gorge itself. Continuing west, we'll keep an eye out for areas where there's been recent rain. These can be good places to pick up some additional sandgrouse, like black-bellied sandgrouse and pin-tailed sandgrouse. Pin-tailed sandgrouse has to be one of the best looking of all the sandgrouse. Such a great bird. So continuing west, we end up in the town of Ouarzazate. It's quite fun to say. This town is famous as the movie-making capital of Morocco. There are facilities here to help foreign film companies come in and film desert landscapes. So there's been quite a few famous movies filmed in this area. One of them was Lawrence of Arabia. More recently, you had things like The Gladiator and even Game of Thrones have been filmed in Ouarzazate. So the next day, we head west from Ouarzazate, heading towards the coast to the big city of Agadir. Along the way, we'll do some opportunistic birding. We might pick up something like the scarce Bonelli's eagle. When we finally arrive at Agadir, it's quite a change of scene. you're suddenly in a big modern city, and it's much moister here on the coast compared to the desert where we've been. Right in the city, a pallid swift is quite common. It's a lifer for a lot of people. So I spend 2 nights in Agadir, and we do a full day's trip birding down to the Oued Massa, the mouth of the Massa River. You can drive down this road and you can see here's the Oued Massa. It's still quite dry, but you have this big estuary here with lots of wetland habitat, and then you also have this sort of coastal heath habitat, both of which we bird. So we bird this kind of habitat for the #1 target of the day, which is the northern bald ibis. This is a highly endangered bird, and Morocco is the best place left in the world to see it. Really bizarre looking, beautiful bird. It's one in flight. They nest on cliffs. We'll go out to the coast and we'll certainly look for some gulls. This is the common default gull, the lesser black-backed gull. But we'll also be looking for the Audouin's gull. Really beautiful gull. Along with the slender-billed gull. This one has a nice pink breast that they often get in breeding plumage. We'll visit some little freshwater wetlands, which are good for all kinds of species. Here you can see there's northern shoveler and a bunch of marbled teal. Here's a Eurasian spoonbill and a blackwing stilt. Here's some marbled teal in flight. And the ferruginous pochard. We'll do some birding in the sort of Mediterranean heath scrub. We'll be looking for things like Barbary partridge. Sardinian warbler is quite common. So we'll definitely see the Zitting cisticola. I view this as the gateway cisticola. It can be a dangerous experience. There's only one cisticola in Europe and North Africa, but once you get into sub-Saharan Africa, there are dozens and dozens of species. So if you like this one, it might be the beginning of a long cisticola quest. Another cool bird we often see is a little owl, sort of the European and North African equivalent of the burrowing owl. This is another sort of gateway bird. It's the black-crowned chagra. It's the only member of the bushshrike family that's found north of sub-Saharan Africa. So again, if you like this chagra in Morocco, you might find yourself doing a lot of birding elsewhere in Africa. Bushshrikes are one of my favorite African families of birds. You get some common birds, common but wonderful birds like the Eurasian hoopoe. And I love to sea watch, so I always have lunch at a place where we can do some sea watching. And with a bit of luck, we might see some Jaegers, and we might even get a great skua from shore. So after a full day's birding down here, we come back up to Agadir, and in the evening we usually do some birding along this river mouth right in town. The river mouth is a great place for Eurasian thick-knee. After spending the night in Agadir, we head back to Marrakech for the end of the tour. There's a brand new, very nice highway that zips you back to Marrakech. And after checking into our hotel, we head into the old part of Marrakech called the Medina. You can see this very dense center of Marrakech, that's the Medina. It's like this maze of ancient buildings. And this is the most famous sort of landmark, which is the night market in the center of the Medina. That's what it looks like at night. There's street performers and there's spice vendors and all kinds of wonderful street foods. So we end up the tour with a nice kind of cultural experience that even the most hardcore birders tend to enjoy. So that wraps up our Morocco tour, although this may not be the end of the road for a lot of folks. This Morocco tour is designed in conjunction with 2 Spain trips that we do. We do a southern Spain trip and we do a northern Spain trip. So if you're going to continue on the southern Spain trip, you fly from Marrakech to Madrid, you drive out to Extremadura and then to Andalusia. And that's a short trip of about a week, and then we do about a week in northern Spain through Barcelona as well. Here are just a few highlights of the southern Spain trip. It's one of the best places in the world for great bustard. White stork is common. European goldfinch. Some nice umbrella pine woodlands along the Mediterranean. Blue rock thrush. Lots of beautiful rugged scenery, which is very good for nesting raptors. The world's best ham. Quaint little Spanish towns. This is Calandra lark, quite a big lark. Iberian magpie is endemic. Eurasian griffin. For folks who are thinking of doing this tour, I'll tell you just a little bit more about the logistics. The lodges on this tour are very comfortable. Actually, some of my favorite lodges in the world. The lodges are like destinations in themselves. Really, really nice places. And the food is excellent. The roads are pretty good. One thing that is hard about this tour for some folks is that it is quite fast-paced. There's not a lot of downtime and there's a lot of driving. It's only 9 days, so you cover a lot of ground. But there's lots of cultural interest and lots of wonderful scenery. So it's a good tour for a couple, though, where there's a birder and a non-birder. Both tend to be happy on this trip. Well, thanks for watching, and thanks a lot to Lyle Gwynn and Emma Juxon for letting me use their Morocco pictures. And I hope to see you on a real non-virtual birding tour of Morocco or somewhere else in the world before long.